Due to this case being so old, there is little to no available information on William Pollock and who he was. We do know he was a 37-year-old man from St. Petersburg, a city located in Florida. That day, on the 5th of November 2000, William, alongside his friend, visited Disney World in Orlando for a day out at the park. Walt Disney World Resort, located in Orlando, Florida, first opened its gate to the public on October 1st, 1971. Today, it stands as one of the most iconic and most beloved theme parks in the world. Comprising of 4 major theme parks, Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, and Disney's Animal Kingdom, each park offers a unique and immersive experience with different rides. In the Magic Kingdom section of the park lived Splash Mountain, one of Disney's most famous ever rides. Splash Mountain at Disney World, much like the Disneyland version, is a ride inspired by Disney's 1946 film Song of the South. Guests board log-shaped boats and navigate a series of scenes brimming with animatronic characters and picturesque sets. Riders are typically seated in a single row, with 1 or 2 individuals in each row, depending on the size of the rider. The duration of the ride can vary slightly depending on factors such as boat loading times and any temporary stops due to ride maintenance or safety concerns. Generally, the ride lasts around 8 to 12 minutes. That day, William and his friend boarded the ride at the start of the afternoon. William sat down and the ride set off. As the log-shaped boat glided along the course, William suddenly felt unwell. He leaned over to his friend in the adjacent boat and mentioned his discomfort and pretty much told them that he couldn't carry on riding. Unfortunately for William, the ride was in full motion, so he was unable to stop. However, moments later, the ride slowed down to a halt, leaving William with an opportunity to leave the boat and make his escape. He originally climbed out and stood on the side of the canal, next to the animatronic animals. He then attempted to make his way across the water, possibly towards an exit, as the other passengers looked on in bewilderment. He said to other guests, "I'm going to try and cross here." Now at this point the ride was still at a stop, so he decided to climb across one of the boats and make it to the other side. However, just as he stepped onto the boat, the ride started up again. This caused him to slip into the water. Another boat from behind then hit him and crushed him between the wall. One witness said, "We come around this little corner, and he's sitting down on a wall on the side, then gets up. He kept putting his hand over his chest. He'd get up and pace around and sit down." At this point, William had used the boat as a bridge and had fallen in. The witness went on to say, "He just keeps wedging him in further. It packed him in there so tight, I don't think he could breathe." The boat just took off. The ride started again, and when that happened, he slipped and went to the left side of our boat and got wedged between our boat and the wall. Panic and horror engulfed the passengers on nearby logs. They screamed and cried for help, but their pleas were drowned out by the mechanical whirring of the ride and the terrifying collisions of the logs behind them. One witness named Debbie Johnson, who was in the log that crushed William, said, "We screamed and yelled for help. We were stuck, and each time the boat hit us from behind, it was crushing him." When Disneyland officials were made aware of the accident, they shut down the ride and quickly evacuated everyone on board and the people who were lining up. William was then transported to Celebration Hospital's emergency room, and at 3:08 p.m, he was officially declared dead. The ride was shut down and an investigation was launched. Disney quickly released a statement straight away saying that William's death had nothing to do with the ride itself. Disney World spokesman Rena Callahan said she could not comment on witness statements to the police, but said that when ride operators learned that there was something wrong, the ride was stopped immediately. She said that she did not know at what point the ride was shut down. Police quickly learned that prior to the fatal accident, some alert passengers had noticed William's unusual behaviour inside the ride and had informed Disney World employees. They considered his actions odd and upon exiting the ride, warned the staff of his presence. There were mixed claims, some saying an announcement was made when William left the log, but others said no such announcements were ever made. A close friend of William Pollock, Thomas Riley, who was at the park with them that day, was in a separate log. He remained bewildered about what compelled his friend to leave the boat. He insisted that it was a tragic accident and that no one should be held accountable for the unfortunate turn of events. He stated, "We were with him, and we still don't know what happened. It was an accident, and I don't believe anyone was to blame." Others claim that William may have had a panic attack, which led him to leave the boat. Disney maintained that they had fully cooperated with the Orange County Sheriff's Office during the investigation, and it didn't take long for the police to come to the conclusion that William's death was an accident, and it was put down as accidental death. Lane Thomas Graves was just 2 years old at the time of his death. Described by his parents Matt and Melissa Graves as a bright, joyful and loving little boy, Lane was from Elkhorn, Nebraska. He was a healthy, happy toddler who had just started showing his personality, curious, sweet-natured and full of life. The Graves family had travelled to Florida for a vacation, like so many other families, to experience the magic of Walt Disney World. They were staying at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa, one of the most luxurious hotels on Disney property. Positioned on the edge of the Seven Seas Lagoon, the Grand Floridian is known for its Victorian-style architecture, fine dining, and close proximity to the Magic Kingdom. The resort features white sandy beaches along the edge of the lagoon, inviting areas where guests often relax, take photos, or enjoy the evening's fireworks. At the time, signs near the lagoon read no swimming, but there were no warnings specifically about alligators or wildlife in the area. The beach areas were not fenced off, and the calm appearance of the water gave no indication of hidden danger. For the Graves family, and many others, it seemed like a safe, peaceful environment. It was around 8:30 p.m. on June 14, 2016. The Graves had been at an outdoor movie night on the lawn of the hotel. They made their way down to the beach area that bordered the Seven Seas Lagoon, a man-made lake that sits between the resort and Magic Kingdom. It was warm and calm, and children were playing in the sand. Lane, just 2 years old, was walking near the shoreline, splashing his feet in the shallow water. His mother and father were nearby, keeping a close eye on their 2 children. Suddenly and without warning, an alligator estimated to be between 6 and 7 feet long lunged from the lagoon and grabbed Lane. His father, Matt Graves, immediately rushed into the water and tried to wrestle the animal off his son. Despite the desperate efforts, he was unable to free Lane from the gator's grip. The animal disappeared back into the lagoon, dragging the toddler under the surface. Chaos erupted on the beach. Resort security and emergency responders were called immediately, and search efforts began almost instantly. The lake was quickly cordoned off, and specialized teams, including divers and wildlife officers, worked through the night using sonar and search equipment. Nearby beaches and marinas were cleared, and guests were asked to remain indoors. For 16 hours, crews combed the lagoon. Tragically, the following afternoon, Lane's body was found intact, submerged in the water not far from where he had been taken. Authorities confirmed that he had died from drowning and traumatic injuries, consistent with an alligator attack. In the days that followed, wildlife officers captured and euthanized several alligators from the Seven Seas Lagoon for forensic examination. Although officials were unable to definitively identify which alligator had taken Lane, suggested it was likely one of 2 female alligators found near the scene. No remains were found inside any of the bodies, but bite marks and proximity were consistent with the attack. A further 250 alligators would later be removed. Attention quickly turned to Disney and whether enough had been done to protect guests. At the time of the incident, there were no signs specifically warning about alligators, despite the lagoon being a known habitat for them. Florida, with its warm climate and abundant waterways, is home to more than 1 million alligators. It is not uncommon for them to enter man-made bodies of water like golf course pools or resort lagoons. Some guests later came forward claiming they had seen gators in the area earlier in the day and believed warnings should have been posted. In a public statement shortly after the incident, the Walt Disney World president said, "There are no words to convey the profound sorrow we feel for the family and their unimaginable loss. We are devastated, and our hearts go out to them during this time of grief." The Graves family released a statement saying, "Melissa and I are broken. We will solely focus on the future of our family and the healing of our hearts." Following the tragedy, Disney installed barriers and ropes along the beaches of all its resorts bordering the water. They also added clear signage warnings of the presence of wildlife, including alligators and snakes. In addition, the company implemented more aggressive wildlife monitoring and removal programs in collaboration with the FWC. The investigation ultimately concluded that this was a rare and unprovoked predatory attack. Lane had not been feeding the animals, and there was no indication of negligence on the park or the parents. Instead, it was a devastating convergence of circumstance. Natural wildlife intersecting with human-designed spaces in a moment that forever altered a family and led to a permanent policy change across Disney properties. In the wake of the Lane Thomas Graves death, there was no public lawsuit filed against Disney by his parents Matt and Melissa. Many people, including legal experts and journalists, noted the absence of litigation and wondered if a private settlement had been reached behind closed doors. While official details remain sealed, certain court records and actions suggest a financial agreement may have been made. Florida wrongful death attorneys have speculated that Disney may have privately settled with the Graves family for a significant amount, possibly in the range of $10 million or more. Rather than seek retribution, Matt and Melissa Graves turned their grief into a force for good by establishing the Lane Thomas Foundation. The organization, based in Omaha, Nebraska, provides financial and emotional support to families of children in need of life-saving organ transplants. Since being founded, the foundation has helped dozens of families in crisis and continues to be a beacon of hope for those navigating the darkest of times. Lane Graves was laid to rest during a private funeral in Elkhorn, his hometown. The service was intimate, surrounded by family and close friends who gathered to honour the short but meaningful life of a little boy who left a lasting impact on so many. A year later, on what would have been his third birthday, hundreds came together again for a public memorial held at Elkhorn's South High School. Blue balloons were released into the sky, and attendees wore shirts printed with messages of love and remembrance. The Graves family handed out M&M cookies, which were Lane's favourite, and silver crosses with blue ribbons, attached to cards with prayers and memories. Speaking to the crowd, Melissa said, "You'll always be Mummy's loving, sweet baby boy. We miss you, buddy, and we miss those hugs and kisses." Matt echoed her words, recalling the joy Lane brought into their lives and expressing gratitude for the overwhelming support they had received from the community. In September 2018, Matt and Melissa Graves shared a deeply personal and hopeful announcement: the birth of their son, Christian Lane Graves. In a public statement, they said, "Although we know the pain of losing Lane will never go away, we feel God has blessed our family with a precious miracle of life. May Lane Graves rest in peace." Luan Phil Dawson was born in Vietnam on the 28th of August, 1964. He was a smart man and was always destined for great things from an early age. As a young man, Luan moved to the United States of America, where he quickly rose through the ranks of the ever-growing Microsoft Corporation to become their senior computer programmer and test engineer at the age of 33. Whilst in America, he met his future wife, Liu Thoi Fong, who he went on to have a son with. The family lived in Duval, Washington, and for Christmas of 1998, decided to take their son and grandchild to Disneyland, California. The day was going as expected when at an unknown time, the family decided to board the sailing ship Columbia ride, which is where their nightmare began. The sailing ship Columbia ride, a prominent attraction at Disneyland, has always captivated visitors with its nostalgic charm. Opening to the public on June 14th, 1958, this replica of the first ever American ship to travel the globe instantly became a beloved fan favourite. The boat's meticulous detailing and craftsmanship transports guests back in time to the golden era of 18th century sailing. Departing every 25 minutes from the Frontier landing in Frontierland, the 110 feet long Columbia ship awaits eager passengers. Powered by a compressed natural gas engine, the Columbia set sail on a captivating voyage along the rivers of America. As the ship glides through the waters, passengers enjoy the captain's entertaining commentary, along with nautical music that sets the mood. The journey includes an exciting moment when cannons are fired at Fort Wilderness, on Tom Sawyer's Island, immersing guests in the adventure. The ride is one of the tamest in the park, with little to no restrictions, and until Christmas Eve of 1998, had an impeccable safety record. Sometime during the day of the 24th of December 1998, the ship was making its way around the rivers of America, ready to dock at Frontierland to pick up the next guests. On the platform was Luan Dawson and his wife Lou, and their young son and grandchild, who were all in good spirits and looking forward to sailing the Columbia, but something wasn't right. The boat was sailing too fast towards the dock, so, thinking on her feet, Assistant General Manager Christine Carpenter attached the mooring line to a metal cleat located on the dock. A docking cleat, also known as a mooring cleat, is a device used to secure a boat or ship to a dock or pier. It consists of a metal or wooden structure with arms or horns that serve as attachment points for ropes and lines. The cleat's purpose is to provide a secure and stable connection between the vessel and the dock, allowing for safe and reliable mooring. It plays a crucial part in ensuring the stability and safety of the boat or ship whilst it's stationary at the dock. Due to the momentum of the ship, once the mooring line was wrapped around the cleat, the rope stretched taut. This caused tension, which then caused the 8-pound cleat to rip loose from the dock, flinging 15 feet into the crowd waiting to board the ship at a massive speed. It flew towards Luan and struck him in the face and neck. This tore part of his jaw off as he fell to the ground unconscious. The cleat also hit Lou, paralysing her face. Christine Carpenter was also injured during the incident. The scene, to put it lightly, was a horrific bloody mess. All three were transported to hospital, where Luan was now brain dead and was put on life support. His wife Lou was critically injured, but expected to recover, and Christine remained hospitalised with leg injuries. Sadly, a few days after the gruesome incident, Luan was taken off life support and pronounced dead on the 28th of December, 1998. The attraction was then shut down, and an investigation was launched. The first area of investigation was the cleat. The crucial question was whether the cleat was intended for stopping the boat or solely for securing it after the docking process was complete. If the cleat was repeatedly misused, it could have endured excessive strain and stress, resulting in the accident. The report stated, the normal procedure when the ship is coming in too fast is to not secure the mooring line. Instead, workers should let the ship overshoot the dock and then reverse. Christine attached the line to the cleat, claiming that she did not know that the helmsman planned to overshoot the dock. Investigators raised inquiries into whether Christine received comprehensive training and found that the 30-year-old assistant manager, who had assumed her position only 2 months prior, was temporarily substituting for a regular ride operator at the time of the incident. Disney spokesman Ray Gomez claimed investigators could check the records and see that she was properly trained, but the records were inconclusive. The first officer to report on the scene was Orange County's Richard McAnally. According to him, he was made to wait in the conference room for a long time before he could examine the scene, which at first did not look good for Disneyland, as they had cleaned the scene before they let him go in. However, this was disregarded by the Anaheim police, who said that Disney did not obstruct justice. They said, "We also determined that Disneyland didn't clean it up to destroy evidence of criminal conduct. They cleaned it up, in my opinion, as being the ranking person there, because it was unsightly." Disney backed this up and defended its decision to clean up the accident site before the police arrival, stating that it was done to minimise the shock and disturbance for other guests. The incident involving the Columbia ship sparked a nationwide discussion about theme park safety, and a wrongful death lawsuit was launched by the family of the victim. This led to significant changes in California's legal system. Legislation was introduced to ensure independent inspections of theme parks like Disneyland, as well as mandatory inspections, which played a crucial role in investigating multiple incidents at Disneyland. One of the most damning findings in the lawsuit was that Disney used an inappropriate rope. They used nylon instead of the original hemp rope for docking the Columbia. The nylon rope had greater elasticity and braking strength, which contributed the cleat to be propelled into the crowd. They used this rope to save money. They claimed that Disney was aware of rope breakages, but failed to replace the nylon rope with a safer hemp rope. It was also concluded that Disney failed to train its employees on proper docking procedures. This includes Christine, who was responsible that day for securing the ship. Other findings included lack of communication between staff members and inadequate cleat security. The family of Luan reached a settlement with Disneyland for an undisclosed sum. The settlement was estimated to be around $20 to $25 million. Disneyland also received a maximum penalty fine for equipment misuse and inadequate training of the employee responsible for docking the ship. As a result of the Columbia incident, Disneyland implemented several changes to its ride operations, including the adoption of bell signals, revised docking procedures for the ship, and a thorough review and update of all ride procedures. Lead operators were reinstated on most rides, a position with extensive experience that had been phased out on many attractions, including the Columbia. After the case, Lou recovered but had life-altering injuries. She has remained out of the public eye ever since. I hope her and her children are doing better today. As for the Columbia, after some updates, the ship reopened and continues to be one of Disneyland's most popular attractions to this day. Mel Yorba was just 18 years old at the time of his death. Friends and family described him as lively, energetic and friendly, a young man full of potential. Others described him as easygoing with a bright personality. He was born on the 6th of September in 1962 in Riverside County, California, and was from a well-known, respected family. On March the 7th, 1981, Mel and a group of his friends went to Disneyland to celebrate a special after-hours event. That evening, Disneyland was not operating under its usual conditions. The park was hosting a private party organised by Raw Industries, a Southern California aerospace manufacturing company. Around 10,000 tickets were distributed to Raw employees and their guests, allowing access to Disneyland after its regular closing time. The atmosphere was festive but slightly different from the usual daytime crowds. There were more teenagers and young adults, less supervision, and looser controls over behaviour. For many attendees, it was a chance to enjoy Disneyland in a freer, more relaxed environment. For Mel, it was supposed to be a night of fun and celebration. It was near the Matterhorn bobsleds attraction that the evening turned deadly. There are multiple reports of what happened that night, but we do know at around 10 at night, Yorba accidentally bumped into another park guest, a 28-year-old man named James O'Driscoll. James was with his girlfriend, 25-year-old Julie Holderer. According to James, Julie had told him that Mel had touched her inappropriately. An argument broke out between the two groups. Witnesses described it as a mix of shoving, yelling, and posturing, the kind of confrontation that might have fizzled out under other circumstances. However, O'Driscoll was carrying a knife. After landing a few punches on each other, in the heat of the moment, he pulled out the weapon and stabbed Mel Yorba viciously. Mel staggered away, bleeding heavily. Chaos broke out as guests screamed and tried to clear a path. Disneyland security responded quickly, but at the time, the park did not have efficient emergency teams on site. The Disneyland nurse who attended Mel, who lay bleeding on the ground, decided not to call 911. This was because she was worried it would bring bad attention to Disneyland. Instead of calling 911, he was picked up, placed into a van, and drove to a hospital in Gardens Grove. This was not a medical van, and they had no life-saving equipment in it. According to reports, the staff who was driving Mel missed 2 trauma centres on the way to the hospital, which would have been better at handling the situation. By the time he arrived at the hospital, he was already in cardiac arrest. Doctors knew there was no saving him, and the happiest place on earth had, for the first time, become the scene of a murder. Meanwhile, Disneyland security moved swiftly to contain the situation. O'Driscoll's girlfriend was apprehended as she attempted to leave the park, ensuring that potential witnesses and accomplices could be questioned. A search of the surrounding area was quickly organised. Divers were deployed and recovered a knife, an 8.5-inch blade, from one of the park's waterways, reported to be either the Sleeping Beauty Castle moat or the Submarine Voyage Lagoon. Despite the crowds and confusion, O'Driscoll remained inside the park for only a short time before security located him, hiding in the bushes of Adventureland. Within a little over an hour, he was taken into custody, bringing an end to Disneyland's first and only manhunt for a murder suspect within its gates. The tragedy triggered an immediate and overwhelming public outcry. Unlike past incidents where Disneyland's influence often tempered local response, Anaheim officials spoke out forcefully. Leaders from both the Anaheim Fire Department and Orange County's Office of Emergency Medical Services publicly expressed frustration. Chief of Operations Marcel Thompson told the Los Angeles Times that his department had warned Disneyland about the risks of not involving local paramedics. He said, "Something like this is tough to accept. We had a fire station just a minute away and a medical unit only 3 minutes out. Further criticism came from County Emergency Services officials, who disclosed that Disneyland had previously declined to call for paramedics during earlier medical emergencies. In those cases, concerns about disrupting the park's carefully curated image reportedly outweighed the need for timely medical intervention. One official said, "The city of Anaheim tried to get them to change, but Disneyland didn't want the commotion that paramedics might cause. They decided it was better to avoid any public spectacle." Media reports at the time emphasised that Disneyland's reluctance to summon outside help stemmed largely from the fear that the presence of emergency vehicles and personnel could tarnish its family-friendly image. This long-standing internal policy was now exposed to public scrutiny in the harshest way possible. Meanwhile, James was charged with second-degree murder. Superior Court Judge Everett Dickey said James was a ticking time bomb with a chip on his shoulder. He did not believe the defense plea that Mel lunged towards him, causing the stabbing. He said, "You were in a public place, unnecessarily armed with a deadly weapon, and you killed a stranger. Even if it was true somebody grabbed your girlfriend's rear end, it didn't justify killing." I will mention, James and his girlfriend were the only ones that said Mel had done this. Other witnesses disagreed. James was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Roughly a month after Mel Yorba's death, his grieving family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Disneyland, seeking $60 million in damages. Although the trial ultimately resulted in a jury award far below that amount, $600,000, the Yorba family felt a sense of justice. His mother said, "We owed it to Mel to make sure the truth came out, so that nothing like this could happen again. Now, everyone knows we were right." Mel Yorba's death remains an uncomfortable chapter in Disneyland's history, one that is rarely discussed openly by the park. In fact, it fed into one of the most persistent urban legends about Disneyland, the idea that no one dies at Disneyland. The myth suggests that no matter how severe an injury, no guest is ever officially declared dead within the park's borders. The implication is that authorities or park officials will delay pronouncements of death until a guest has been transported off-site, preserving the illusion that Disneyland is free from death, which obviously isn't the case. Today, Disneyland is a very different place when it comes to security and safety. Metal detectors, bag searchers, uniformed security officers, and paramedic stations are standard. Every guest passes through multiple layers of screening before even reaching the entrance gates. Disneyland also implemented several changes, including hiring an ambulance service and adjusting its emergency protocols to ensure more timely and effective responses to medical emergencies. In many ways, Mel's death and the horrifying realization that violence could reach even into Disneyland helped catalyze those changes. May he rest in peace. Despite being a massive story at the time, little is known about the victim. We do know that Marcelo Torres was born to parents James and Carmen Torres on the 30th of August 1981 in Torrance, California. He was described as being a good and obedient kid. In his younger years, Marcelo attended high school in Arizona, where he was described as a role model to others. His friends said he never drank or smoked or did anything like that. He then moved on to Brooks College in Long Beach, California, where he was studying to become an animator, which was a passion that followed him throughout his life. It was here that Marcelo met Vicente Gutierrez, who would go on to become his business associate and best friend. On September the 5th, 2003, Marcelo and Vicente, along with their other friends Christina Becker and Shannon Zinder, decided to go to Disneyland for an unforgettable day. That day was unforgettable, but not in the way that they had hoped. On that day, the group of friends arrived at Disneyland, California, early on in the morning, and after riding a few other attractions, decided to go on the Big Thunder Mountain roller coaster. The Big Thunder Mountain Railroad first opened on the 2nd of September 1979 and was designed by Tony Baxter and Bill Watkins. The ride goes up to 58 kilometers an hour and has a track length of 2,671 feet. There are 4 different versions located in different Disneyland parks, and the Big Thunder Mountain has always been one of Disney's most popular rides. The roller coaster has a detailed backstory with Western themes and is one of the tamer in the park, catering to people of all ages. There aren't any inversions or significant drops, but it moves rapidly, and has a lot of dips and tight corners. There is a total of 5 trains and a locomotive. The locomotive was the train at the front and was purely cosmetic. Each car had 3 benches, and the safety restraint included a lap bar. 5 years prior to Marcello riding, there had been an incident where a 5-year-old boy was seriously injured on the ride after his foot became wedged between the car and the platform. This led to his left foot being amputated. After this, the safety on the ride was improved, but Disneyland never acknowledged the injury to be the reason. The 4 boarded train 2 on Big Thunder Mountain at some time in the morning. Marcello was sat next to Vicente in the front of the car, which was behind the locomotive. He was sat on the right hand side. His 2 friends Cristina and Shannon were sat directly behind them. The lap bar lowered, and the ride set off. Around 1/3 into the ride, the locomotive, which was in front of Marcello and Vicente, derailed before entering the tunnel. The following comes from the Court of the State of California documents. The derail wheels slammed into the brakes attached to the floor between the rails. This impact forced the rear of the locomotive up and its nose down. When the front of the locomotive struck brake 4, the back shot upwards towards the ceiling of the tunnel. Violently breaking away from the cars as it pitched up, the locomotive slammed into the tunnel roof and came crashing down onto the first passenger car. The force of the impact crushed the fiberglass and metal frame of the car. In doing so, the entire weight of the locomotive crashed down on top of Marcello Torres, crushing his chest and pinning his body to the seat. In short, the locomotive derailed, causing it to nosedive. The back end then hit the top of the tunnel, which then crashed down onto Marcello, violently crushing him in the process. He was, however, still alive, but trapped in his seat. Despite paramedics' best efforts, he eventually bled out on the scene. 10 others were injured in the accident. Some of them managed to evacuate themselves, and others were sent to hospital. Vicente, who was riding next to Marcello, said the last thing that he remembered was going through the tunnel. He said, "All of a sudden, I heard something really loud and shaky. I told myself, this isn't normal. I really thought it was a dream. I had 4 flashes, like I was in and out. I fainted, then woke up and fainted again. I saw Marcello unconscious, then 2 of my other friends. It was a blur." After hearing his friend hadn't made it, he said he was devastated. The ride was then closed down, and an investigation was launched. The investigation brought up some shocking findings. Unknown to any of the park's guests that day, the Big Thunder Mountain was experiencing problems for weeks leading up to the 5th of September. This was known by Disney, the mechanics, and ride operators, but were ignored. The noises heard were clicking noises. 3 days before the incident, the maintenance team replaced an unstopped wheel on the ride, but inadequately tightened the bolts, resulting in a yellow warning light. The same warning light showed up on the day of the incident, but ride operators claimed that they didn't know what it meant, so carried on as usual. They also did test rides that day where they heard unusual noises and concluded that the ride should be shut down for safety reasons, but didn't, due to fear from upper management, so allowed guests to ride anyway. Investigators claimed that the incident happened due to a mechanical failure, blaming ride operators, the mechanics, and Disney management. The report also stated that the ride was safe, but safety regulations had to change. Staff had to be completely retrained and take action if any unusual noise was heard. Wiley Aitken, that represented the Torres family, said, "This was not just one mechanic making a mistake. This was really systemic to how they were running the park." The Marcello family rightfully sued Disneyland for wrongful death and settled their case for an undisclosed sum 2 years after the death of their son. After settling their case, the Torres family donated $500,000 to Brooks College to provide scholarships for aspiring animators like Marcello. Marcello's mother stated, "There is no money possible to pay for his life, ever. But that is the only remedy the law can provide. Now that this exhausting emotional process has finally concluded and we have our answers, we will hopefully have some closure." Disney fully accepted responsibility for the disaster, which claimed the life of Marcello and injured 10 others. Their spokesman stated, "We all deeply regret that this tragic accident occurred and are terribly saddened by the grievous pain this caused the Torres family." The ride opened again in 2004, and there have been no further incidents. But the death of Marcella will forever be a haunting reminder of what can happen and go wrong when safety regulations are not followed or maintained. Rebecca Corrigan was born on March the 11th, 1987 in Chester, England. She grew up in a close-knit family with her parents, Mike and Anne Corrigan, and was known for her fun personality and outgoing nature. Friends and family described her as upbeat, caring, and always ready to help others. She had a background in youth work and studied youth studies at Liverpool Hope University before moving to Maine in the United States to work with Camp America. After returning home, she decided that she wanted to work with young people in a more unique setting, on a cruise ship. In 2010, Rebecca joined the Disney Cruise Line as a youth worker, looking after children and teens during voyages. Her second assignment was the Disney Wonder, one of Disney's 4 cruise ships at the time. The Wonder is a massive vessel, over 80,000 tons, with the signature Disney flair, whimsical decor, costumed characters, Broadway-style shows, and a strong emphasis on a family-friendly image. Behind the scenes though, crew members worked long hours and lived in close quarters, often far from home for months at a time. Rebecca had previously worked on the Wonder, and had recently returned from a break at home in Chester. According to her parents, she was excited to be back on board and had spoken about plans for the future, including hopes of eventually working for Disney in their parks division. When Rebecca worked on these cruises, she kept in contact with her family, talking to them when she could every day. Everything seemed normal, until all of a sudden it wasn't. It was the early morning of March the 22nd, 2011. The Disney Wonder was sailing along the Pacific coast of Mexico, between Cabo San Lucas and Puerto Vallarta. At approximately 5:45 am, CCTV footage captured 24-year-old Rebecca Corrigan in the crew area of the ship. She was using an internal crew phone, pacing nervously, visibly distressed. She was wearing men's clothing, and at one point, she rubbed her face and placed her hands on her head in what looked like frustration or anxiety. A male colleague walked past and asked if she was okay. She responded, "Yeah, fine," and he kept walking. Moments later, she ended the call and walked off camera. That was the last confirmed sighting of Rebecca Corrigan. She failed to report for her shift later that morning. When she couldn't be reached, ship security began checking her usual areas, her cabin, staff-only locations, and common rooms. Her cabin appeared undisturbed. Her belongings were still there. Nothing seemed obviously out of place except for the fact that she had vanished. Later that day, a pair of flip-flops was found near the crew pool area. Disney officials would later claim they belonged to Rebecca, though this detail would be heavily scrutinised. But more on that later. That night, after not hearing from their daughter, Disney officials called Rebecca's parents to inform them that their daughter had gone missing.
It was 11:15 in the evening, just getting set to go to bed really, and the phone rang.
And they said, "Well, just to inform you that your daughter's missing at sea."
That was the start of the nightmare.
Despite searches on board and along the ship's route, there was no sign of Rebecca. No messages, no distress calls, no witnesses claiming to see her fall or jump. By the time the Wonder docked in Los Angeles 3 days later, Rebecca was still missing, leaving behind only questions and a haunting final image. A young woman, under clear emotional strain, walking away from a phone and into a mystery that to this day has still not been solved. When the Disney Wonder returned to LA, Rebecca's parents flew out to board the ship. What they expected was answers. What they got, instead, was carefully managed access, scripted explanations, and a growing sense that the truth was being kept at an arm's length. The investigation into her disappearance was from the beginning flawed. Because the Disney Wonder is registered in the Bahamas, probably for tax reasons, jurisdiction over the case fell to their authorities, despite the fact that the ship had departed from Los Angeles and Rebecca was a British citizen. Only one officer from the Bahamas boarded the ship. He reportedly stayed less than 24 hours. He spoke to a limited number of crew, reviewed small portions of CCTV footage, and conducted no forensic examination of Rebecca's cabin. There was no full search of the ship, no interviews with the passengers, no reconstruction of a timeline. The officer left the ship, and that was that. Disney insisted to the parents from early on that Rebecca had most likely been swept overboard by a freak wave while standing near the crew pool, a private, staff-only deck. But as her family quickly realised, the explanation made very little sense. The pool area was surrounded by high walls, specifically designed to prevent people from falling or being washed overboard. Also, no weather reports indicating rough seas or large waves at the time. What the family also found disturbing was how controlled their visit to the ship was. They were never allowed to speak freely with Rebecca's colleagues. Disney officials were always present. Every conversation felt monitored. According to Mike, her father, crew members seemed nervous and tight-lipped. One reportedly slipped a comment that things on the ship weren't right, but didn't elaborate. Then came the flip-flops. Disney showed the Corrigan family a pair of flip-flops found near the pool and told them that they belonged to Rebecca. But when her father picked them up, he noticed something odd. Inside one of the shoes, written in black marker, was a different crew member's name. They also weren't the style of flip-flops that she'd wear, and they were not Rebecca's size. They clearly weren't hers, and yet this was being presented as evidence to support the wave theory. Disney gave her parents back her belongings and wiped their hands with the situation. Back home in the UK, the Corrigan family pushed for a deeper investigation. They lobbied the British government and spoke to the media. Adding more fuel to speculation, the Corrigan family later discovered that Rebecca's bank accounts had activity after she disappeared. A small transaction was logged with no explanation. Her Facebook password was also reportedly changed by someone unknown at some point after she was declared missing. A year later, her family received an email which told them that Rebecca had been seen in Venice with a man, but she had no passport. This would not have been possible unless she was trafficked, but this turned out to be deemed as a hoax. Another strange thing is that if someone goes overboard on a cruise, it would have most likely been caught on CCTV. Journalist John Ronson decided to go on and find out for himself, and found multiple cameras all over the Disney Wonder. He said that there was only one deck she could have gone over. This was the jogging track, and he wondered whether she went for a jog and slipped after the phone call. The only dilemma with this is that there were 4 cameras on the jogging track, so someone would have seen her go over. He asked a member of staff about this, who then said no, she went over on deck 5. This member of staff said he'd been on the ship that day. He said everyone knows she was on deck 5 where the staff swimming pool is, and she jumped overboard on the starboard side. Other members of staff said this too, with one saying that Disney knows everything because everything is taped. And why was she on CCTV at 5 in the morning? Well, it came out that she was having relations with 2 other people on board, which explains the men's baggy clothing. She was involved in a romantic relationship with a fellow female crew member. Additionally, there are claims suggesting that she had a sexual encounter with a male crew member, potentially leading to a complex love triangle. This male co-worker was also apparently the ex-boyfriend of the female co-worker that she was involved with. So I'm sure this could have got very complicated. This co-worker was Tracy Medley, and according to her that night, her and Rebecca had a threesome with the male colleague. After it, Rebecca left saying that she needed to go for a walk. This may have caused emotional tension for Rebecca, who according to Tracy, had been depressed for a few weeks. However, Tracy claimed that she was never interviewed by the police or contacted again after initially speaking with Rebecca's family. In the end, the official ruling was simple: presumed lost at sea. No foul play was confirmed, no criminal investigation launched, case closed. But for most people who knew Rebecca and loved Rebecca, nothing about the conclusion felt right. A young woman vanished from one of the most secure cruise ships in the world, with no body, no witnesses, and no real investigation. Disney quickly moved on. The Bahamas offered silence, and the Corrigan family was left without knowing what really happened to their daughter. It has now been over a decade since she had disappeared from the Disney Wonder. In that time, her body has never been found. What remains is a timeline full of holes, a corporation determined to protect its image, and a family still searching for answers that may never come. One of her co-workers on the ship did say that she had struggled with depression, and wasn't the happy, upbeat person everyone thought she was, which makes the jump theory a little more plausible. Many believe that she jumped and this doesn't go along with Disney's image, and they covered it up. They then hid the CCTV from authorities. This is probably the most likely explanation, but it is really hard to tell. Rebecca was more than just a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a vibrant young woman full of curiosity and compassion. She lived to work with underprivileged children and dreamed of seeing the world. By all accounts, she was generous, empathetic, and just a lovely person. In the years since, Rebecca's family has never stopped looking for the truth, but it is safe to assume she is no longer with us. In their words, "We just want answers. We want to know what happened to our daughter." Maybe one day they'll get these answers, because Disney definitely has that footage, but I doubt it will ever get released because of their image. Until then, Rebecca's story stands as an open wound in the pristine image of a family-friendly, billion-dollar company. May she never be forgotten. Not much is known about today's victim, but we do know that she was called Cristina Moreno. She was 23, and she was visiting the United States in June of 2000 for her honeymoon. She was originally from Spain and living in Barcelona, and had been staying in the Hollywood area for their trip. On June the 25th of 2000, the couple had planned to spend the day at Disneyland, California, something that they'd always wanted to do. The day was going as you'd expect, until the couple decided to board the Indiana Jones adventure ride, which is where their nightmare began. The Indiana Jones ride, officially known as the Indiana Jones Adventure Temple of the Forbidden Eye, was a popular attraction at Disneyland, which opened on March the 3rd, 1995 at Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California. The ride was inspired by the Indiana Jones film franchise starring Harrison Ford, which debuted in 1981. Riders would board rugged troop transport vehicles resembling military trucks, designed to navigate rough terrain and simulate the feeling of an expedition. The vehicles would take visitors through a series of elaborate sets, including dark passageways, treacherous bridges, and encounters with animatronic creatures and special effects. It combined speed sections, sudden turns, and immersive special effects to create an exciting and immersive adventure that transported visitors into the world of Indiana Jones. The duration of the Indiana Jones ride varied, but on average it lasted approximately 3 to 4 minutes. The ride wasn't exactly fast, but the vehicles would simulate fast-paced maneuvers, sudden stops, and dramatic turns, giving the riders a sensation of speed and excitement without actually travelling at high speeds. To ensure rider safety, the Indiana Jones ride employed various restraints. Each vehicle was equipped with individual lap bars that would secure passengers in their seats during the ride. Additionally, seatbelts were provided to further enhance safety. These safety restraints were designed to keep riders in place and prevent them from standing or exiting the vehicle whilst in motion. So on that day, they boarded the Indiana Jones ride, and the ride began, and everything appeared normal. The ride itself had an impeccable safety record, and as usual was running fine. Cristina, however, was not enjoying the ride. She appeared to look sick and began complaining that she didn't feel right. Nevertheless, the ride continued and finished around 4 minutes later. Cristina and her partner left the ride, but Cristina wasn't okay. She now had a splitting headache, she couldn't think properly, and her partner was obviously very worried. They thought it would be best to call it quits on the day and head back to their Hollywood hotel, which they did. Unfortunately for Cristina, the headache didn't pass, it just got worse. Cristina then passed out, which prompted her partner to rush her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where it was discovered that she had a brain hemorrhage. A brain hemorrhage, also known as a cerebral hemorrhage, is a serious medical condition characterized by bleeding within the brain. It occurs when blood vessels in the brain rupture or leak, leading to the accumulation of blood in or around the brain tissue. This bleeding can cause pressure and damage to brain cells, leading to a range of symptoms depending on the location and extent of the hemorrhage. After this was discovered, she was transported by air ambulance back to Spain so she could be with her family, but Cristina never regained consciousness. Little over 2 months after the incident, Cristina was pronounced dead on September the 1st of 2000. 1 year after Cristina died, Cristina's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Disneyland. They claimed that this was not the first case of brain injury caused by the ride, and that Disney decided to push the envelope to the extreme in creating the attraction. Now at this point, Disney had no idea that the death had occurred, and only knew about it once the family had filed their lawsuit. The first statement Disneyland made said, "Safety always has been, and continues to be, our top priority." Their lawsuit contended that the victim's demise resulted from the ride's violent shaking and imposed stresses. During an interlocutory appeal, the California Supreme Court ruled that amusement parks, including Disney, are regarded as common carriers. The classification of amusement parks as common carriers was significant in the legal context of this case. The designation of common carrier imposes a higher duty of care on these establishments towards their patrons. This classification recognised that amusement parks, including Disney, have a duty to provide a safe experience for their guests and take appropriate measures to prevent harm or injury. Labelling amusement parks as common carriers indicate that they should adhere to strict safety standards and be held accountable if they fail to meet those standards. The Disney company contested this lawsuit brought by the Moreno family, asserting that the common carrier standard should not be applied to an amusement ride while transportation is viewed as incidental consequence of entertainment and thrill. The Moreno family argued that the Indiana Jones attraction, designed to resemble off-road jeeps, is a carrier of passengers for monetary gain and should be deemed as a common carrier. They also pointed out a previous court ruling that classified Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean ride as a common carrier. Regarding Cristina, it came out that she had pre-existing aneurysms in the past, but her lawyer argued that the roller coaster still caused her death. The coroner backed up the Moreno family and believed that the stress of the ride contributed to her death. The Court of Appeal ultimately concluded that the Indiana Jones ride met the criteria of a common carrier based on the broad language of being a carrier of persons, and Disney lost the lawsuit and ultimately settled for an undisclosed fee in 2005. After the settlement was reached, the Moreno family attorney said, "There has been a misrepresentation and false advertising in terms of safety, and things have to change. It cannot be business as usual when people are dying on these attractions." The settlement still continues to stir controversy as many believe that this was a freak accident rather than a wrongful death. Attorneys at Disneyland maintain their innocence and claim that the woman's death was unrelated to the ride. No changes were made to the ride until 2002, but Disney claimed that this had nothing to do with the incident and more to make it reliable and durable. Before Disney built Typhoon Lagoon or Blizzard Beach, there was River Country, the company's first water park. It opened on June the 20th, 1976, on the edge of Bay Lake, next to Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground. Unlike the large-scale parks Disney is known for today, River Country was small and built to resemble a rural American swimming hole, the kind found in early 20th century summer camps. The park featured natural-looking rock formations, wooden bridges, and a man-made lagoon that gave the illusion of being part of Bay Lake. At the time, it was one of the first water parks to use filtered lake water, pumped in from Bay Lake through a unique filtration system designed to meet health standards whilst maintaining a natural appearance. The water system would later become one of the most controversial elements of the park. River Country offered a number of attractions for guests. These included the Whoop and Holler Hollow, a pair of 160-foot-long body slides, slippery slides falls, and basic recreational features such as rope swings, tire swings, climbing nets, and a white sand beach. Compared to modern Disney water parks, River Country was small, but in the late 1970s and early 80s, it was considered innovative for combining theme designs with real water and natural landscaping. Its size and design made it more personal and isolated, a deliberate contrast to the expanding, high-capacity parks elsewhere on Disney property. River Country operated for over 2 decades and became a popular destination for guests staying at Fort Wilderness and the surrounding areas. It was promoted as a quieter alternative to the main park, a place to cool off, relax, and spend time outdoors. But while the park seems safe and well maintained on the surface, its reliance on lake water and lack of modern safety features would later become major points of concern. Despite its presentation, Disney's River Country was not without serious problems. Over the years, multiple incidents occurred at the park, but 3 deaths stand out, not just because of the tragedy, but because of what they revealed about the park's design and limitations. In August 1980, an 11-year-old boy from New York died after contracting a rare but deadly amoeba called Naegleria fowleri, a microscopic organism found in warm, fresh water. The boy had been swimming at River Country just days before developing symptoms. The amoeba enters the body through the nose and attacks the brain, causing a condition called primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, which is almost always fatal. Health officials confirmed that the water at River Country was the likely source of the infection. The incident drew attention to the park's use of lake water. Even though it was filtered and chlorinated, the system was not enough to eliminate certain natural occurring organisms in Florida lakes, especially during the summer when temperatures were high. Disney downplayed the incident at the time, calling it a tragic and extremely rare occurrence. However, critics questioned whether the use of lake water, no matter how filtered, was appropriate in a controlled park environment. Disney officials, however, claimed that they could not be blamed for the incident, as the amoeba could breed in any freshwater lake during hot weather. They also said there wasn't much they could do. Disney spokesman Charles Ridgway said, "We are of course concerned and sensitive to any potential health or safety hazards to our guests. I don't know of any action that could be taken as a result of this." 3 of the children that year across Florida died from the same amoeba. The park were not blamed, and they simply moved on. Just 2 years later, in 1982, another tragedy occurred. A 14-year-old boy from North Dakota drowned after going through the Whoop and Holler slide, a major attraction that dumped riders straight into the lake. According to reports, the boy disappeared under the water at the end of the slide, where depth markings were not clearly posted. His family sued Disney, claiming there were no signs indicating how deep the water was, and the park failed to ensure adequate safety precautions. Even more disturbing, court proceedings revealed that dozens of park visitors had to be rescued from the same slide on a daily basis. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger ongoing safety issue. The family eventually won the lawsuit and were awarded $375,000 in damages, but the tragedies didn't stop there. In 1989, a 13-year-old boy from Florida drowned at River Country in yet another fatal accident. According to a letter sent to the Orlando Sentinel, the boy had been on a school trip with classmates and somehow slipped underwater in one of the large pools. This happened without any of the nearby lifeguards noticing. A witness told the newspaper that the lifeguards attempted CPR, but allegedly did so incorrectly, failing to allow air to escape from the boy's nose whilst administering breaths. Disney never confirmed this claim. 3 deaths, all involving young teenagers, all in what was marketed as one of the most family-friendly parks in the world. Whilst Disney never formally linked these incidents to the park's closure, it is difficult not to see their influence on the decision, especially given how sensitive Disney is about their image. After River Country's quiet closure in 2001, and the official announcement of its permanent shutdown in 2005, the site took on a strange new identity, not as a redeveloped resort, but as a decaying, abandoned relic of Disney history. For nearly 2 decades, the remains of the park sat untouched behind fences, slowly becoming reclaimed by nature. Urban explorers and curious Disney fans managed to sneak in over the years, capturing eerie photos and videos of decaying slides, algae-filled pools, and crumbling structures. What made the scene even more surreal was that the electricity still ran through the park for years, and music could occasionally be heard faintly playing from hidden speakers, which is creepy to say the least. For a company known for tightly controlling its image, the lingering presence of a rotten, forgotten water park within the Walt Disney Resort felt out of place and a little creepy. Many speculated that Disney kept the site standing because of complicated zoning, environmental concerns, or perhaps uncertainty about what to do with the land. But others believed it was just a ghost Disney didn't want to talk about, a reminder of accidents, lawsuits, and a unique concept that no longer fit in the modern resort landscape. This started to change in 2016, when River Country's pools were finally filled with cement, signalling the beginning of a long overdue redevelopment. In 2018, demolition of the park officially began, and Disney unveiled plans for Reflections, a Disney lakeside lodge, a nature-themed resort that would pay tribute to the surrounding landscape. But then, silence. By 2021, all mentions of Reflections disappeared from Disney's official channels, and many assumed the project had been cancelled. Another victim of COVID. Then, in 2024, the project was revived under a new name, with construction underway and completion expected by 2027. It was a few days into the new year on January the 3rd, 1984, when 48-year-old Dolly Regina Young, along with her friends, was visiting Disneyland from Arizona for a catch-up and a fun day out. Not much is known about Young, but we do know that she was a former Avon lady and was kind and well liked by adults and children in her area. Young and her friends boarded a bobsled at the Matterhorn's base at 3:30 p.m. The Matterhorn was one of the theme park's most popular rides. The ride is made up of 2 different tracks that run fairly parallel to one another for most of the trip, finally tangling and diverging at the loading areas, imitating being on a bobsled. Riders wore lap belts in their bobsleds to keep them secure inside. Young sat in the far back, alone and away from her friends. A few minutes into the ride, she was thrown from the bobsled onto the tracks below. 19-year-old witness Helen Pishner screamed. Helen recalled seeing a female bouncing on her back on the back of the tracks. After Young had fallen, she was seen trying to get up, when 30 seconds later, the next bobsled came round the corner. Don Pishner, Helen's father, yelled for his daughter to look away from the horror that was about to happen. When Young was hit by the other bobsled, she was instantly decapitated. She was hit in the head and body by the bobsled, killing her instantly, and trapping the bobsled on top of her. When the ride system detected a stuck sled, it instantly shut down that section of the ride. The screams alerted one of the workers, and he dashed up the mountain and came face to face with the terrifying scene. On his way back down for assistance, he ran across 2 additional cast members. He told them not to look. Young was pronounced dead on the scene after the police and the paramedics arrived. Detectives in Anaheim immediately launched an investigation. The difference in this case, however, stems from the fact that there was nothing wrong mechanically with the ride and that it hadn't broken down. She had simply fallen out. The police ruled out foul play, focusing their attention on the seatbelt. Young's seatbelt was open and lying on her empty seat when the police arrived on the scene. Young could not have left the start of the ride with her belt undone, according to Disney officials, because it was standard procedure for the workers to check guests twice to ensure they were fastened in. The family of Regina Young went on to sue Disneyland as they believed the incident happened due to neglect. The family sued for $5 million and came to an undisclosed agreement in March of 1998. It is still argued about today whether the victim purposely unbuckled her seatbelt or if the seatbelt had failed. The Matterhorn was up and running again the next day after the accident. Officials from Disneyland said that they inspected the ride and it was safe to operate. May she rest in peace. Now our last story is that of Deborah Gale Stone. This is the first ever Death at Disneyland video I covered way back in 2021, and is perhaps their most infamous case. Deborah Gale Stone was the first child of Bill and Marilyn Stone and was born in Santa Ana, California on June 18, 1956. Debbie's mother stated, "She was our first child. When she was a little girl, she was outgoing and she would go around the neighborhood and bring home friends and ask me to give them a cookie. Growing up, Debbie was friendly, popular, and excelled in both academics and athletics, particularly track and swimming." According to her dad, very early on you could see what kind of athlete she was. She received the Principal's Award for her outstanding achievements at Santa Ana High School, where she graduated in the top 10 of her class with honors. After high school, Debbie enrolled at Iowa State University. She knew this was going to be expensive, so she applied for a summer job at Disneyland to help pay for her college tuition, and she soon landed the position of Disneyland hostess. She was very excited about this, and it was the coolest place for any teenager to work at the time. America Sings opened in 1974, a show which paid tribute to American history. The structure featured an outer ring of 6 theatres connected by divider walls that rotated mechanically every 4 minutes around the 6 fixed stages in the centre. In short, guests were sat in a theatre which rotated around the main stage 6 times. The show consisted of animatronic animals singing songs and it lasted around 25 minutes. The ride it replaced was the Carousel of Progress, which moved around in a clockwise direction. America Sings rotation was reversed. This meant that on the left-hand side of the stage, the walls moved towards each other and closed in place, separating each theatre. It was the 28th of June 1974, and Debbie had just started her evening shift. Just before work, she had called her parents to ask permission to get engaged, which her parents were thrilled about. Debbie's job was to greet audiences from the left side of the stage with a microphone, and then bid them farewell after the theatre had rotated around the 5 musical scenes. It was around 10:30 p.m. as the last show was coming to a close that Debbie's co-workers heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the theatre. Operators rushed to the scene to find Debbie's body crushed between the walls of the theatre. No one knows exactly what went wrong on that night, but there have been a few theories. She may have tripped, taken a step backwards, or attempted to leap from one stage to the next. But one thing was clear. Debbie was dead, and died a quick but agonising death. Her parents heard the news later that night. It was around 2 in the morning when we got a phone call. It was from somebody that lived on another street, saying that the deputies sheriffs were looking for us. Just about the time I hung up, they pulled up at the house. I still remember that. I can picture 2 guys that were there. I can pretty well picture what they said and what I said. And of course, when you hear that, you go into shock. The feelings are there, but they're dull to the point that you can't really feel anything at all. Ask anyone who has ever lost a child. There was no greater pain on earth for a parent to endure. Following the horrific incident, Disneyland shut down the ride for 2 days, and the stage where Debbie died was shut down for a year. Later, sensory lights were installed on the stages to alert the operator if someone approached the walls too closely. And additional changes were made by installing breakaway walls in case the sensors failed. The ride remained operational until 1988. It was then closed down. Debbie's family sued Disneyland, which resulted in a small settlement. Debbie was laid to rest a few days following, and her parents claimed that despite the settlement, Disneyland were very nice, with their staff often visiting their house with flowers. The Stone family have had hundreds of people write to them and offer their condolences, or just letting them know the impact that Deborah had on people. One of these was a boy that was addicted to drugs. He told them that Deborah had befriended him and gave him the incentive to straighten his life out. This just shows the massive impact she had on her short time on this world. Debbie Stone was known for her kindness and compassion, which is evident in the number of people's lives she made an impact on. And although Debbie is no longer with us, she will always be remembered for this. Remembered for being a source of joy and inspiration to the world. And I will leave this video with a quote from her mum that said, "One thing she was always interested in was finding some way to help others. That's the kind of person our daughter was. I am so thankful that we had, and always had, a wonderful relationship. May Debbie rest in peace."